For this episode, we are going to be taking a look at Anachronox, a game developed by Ion Storm and published in 2001 by Eidos Interactive. Now, hang on. Ion Storm? That actually sounds familiar. Did they do anything else I reviewed? So. Well, after having done 2 episodes in a row now about underwater adventures, naturally I wanted to try to do something different for this episode, and I think it's safe to say I succeeded. Anachronox. I downloaded this game a few years back from GOG because the premise seemed interesting. I played a little bit of it and then just kind of stopped. Couldn't really tell you why, I just decided to move on to other things and never picked the game up again. Until recently, when I happened to be browsing through my GOG library and I saw the game again and took a closer look at its description. Great mix of Japanese and Western style RPG elements, great humor, excellent storytelling, huge world to explore. Why not? I thought to myself. So I re-downloaded it and played the game again in earnest. And oh boy, do I have some things to say about this game. We'll begin with the story, but first, a couple of notes. Now, one, I'll be talking about the whole story as well as my thoughts and experiences throughout, so consider this your spoiler warning. But don't worry though, I'll put a timestamp on the screen you can skip to and avoid spoilers. And secondly, there appear to be points in this game where you can select different party members, possibly making for a different story. So just bear in mind, this is the story as I played and experienced it. First though, here's some stats. The story opens on Anachronox, a planet long since abandoned by its original inhabitants, and now seemingly home to the scum of the universe. Sylvester's Slyboots Buccelli, a down-on-his-luck PI, is having a slight disagreement with someone in the employ of mob boss Detta, to whom Boots owes money. The disagreement ends when the goon tosses Boots out of his office window, which Boots somehow just gets up and walks away from. That's a 2-story drop. I mean, surely he's got to have the wind knocked out of him, a broken rib or two, something. Rowdy, the owner of Rowdy's bar in the storage room that was converted into Boots' office, offers Boots a job, saying the key to his cellar is missing. But Boots turns him down, not wanting to do something so menial. Rowdy advises Boots to go out and find a job instead of waiting for one to come to him, a sentiment echoed by Fatima, Boots' former secretary who was killed sometime before the story began and was preserved in digital form in a device known as a life cursor. One of the bar patrons, Valesta, suggests Boots talks to her friend Dianimo about a possible job, so Boots heads off to her apartment in Frank's flophouse. But as soon as he leaves Rowdy's, a thug picks a fight with him and Boots goes down in one hit. So Fatima sends Boots to Whackmaster Jack's Temple of Beating to get some training. It's here that you get a tutorial about the game's battle system, but we'll get more into that later. Having completed his training, Boots finds Dianimo and immediately notices the woman's not all there. Not mentally, that is, but physically. She explains she was hired by a man named Grumpos to explore an area known as the Mistech Tunnels, but soon after was mauled by one of the tunnel's many denizens, and worse yet, Grumpos stiffed her on the payment. She sends Boots to the tenement building where Grumpos lives, where Boots breaks into Grumpos' apartment, is promptly thwacked in the face by the man himself, and instead of getting revenge for Dianimo, tries to convince Grumpos to hire him instead. Grumpos explains that he has been studying various Mistech artifacts, and that he is close to a breakthrough but needs more samples. Before he'll hire Boots, however, he wants him to obtain a size 5 helmet from one of the city's guards. Through a bit of detective work, not to mention some failed blackmail on my part, Boots obtains the helmet, so Grumpos hires him as a bodyguard, and the two head for the Mystech tunnels. However, security has increased since Dianamo's failed exploration attempt, and the duo find the entrance blocked by a Mephidine door lord. Appearing to be stunk, the duo start considering alternative... Fatima will do that from time to time, anytime she has anything of interest to tell you, which I don't mind so much, I just wish it weren't so loud and sudden. Fatima tells them that the Door Lord would handily squash them in combat, and so suggests seeking a mysterious person known only as Eddie for alternative ways of getting past the Door Lord. By first following a tip, then following an actual person, Boots and Grumpos eventually meet a man named Charlie, who tells them that Eddie, whose full name is Eddie the Chew, lives in the junkyard, and that to see him, they'll need to bring him something chewy and stinky, as chewing on it helps Eddie concentrate. Luckily, Fatima knows of just such an object, the sock of a man with an infected foot. After finding the man and obtaining his sock, they find Eddie the Chew in the junkyard, where Eddie mentions an incriminating secret involving the Door Lord's brother, and the mere knowledge of this secret will get the Door Lord out of their way. The plan works, sort of. The Door Lord says he's genetically predisposed to guard the door, but informs the duo of a secret entrance directly underneath them. Boots and Grumpos enter the tunnels, fight their way through a plethora of creatures, and eventually battle a gigantic stone sentinel in a rather easy boss fight, though that's understandable considering it's the first one. Having defeated and gotten past the stone sentinel, Boots and Grumpos are rewarded with a small cube. Understandably, Boots is rather unimpressed by this trinket, but Grumpos seems to think it's made of Mysterium, the same material Mystech is composed of, and wants to take it back to his lab. However, on the way back, the pair are confronted by Detta and his men, and the mob boss demands the cube. Recognizing they're in no condition to fight the gang, Boots quickly hands over the cube and the gang leaves. Boots begins to do likewise, having completed his job of guarding Grumpos, but the old codger soon tries talking Boots into joining him in unlocking the true potential of Mystech and raking in the profits from it. Grumpos decides he needs to talk with a scientist on the planet Sunder, so they buy shuttle tickets. Before they can leave, Fatima insists that Boots goes back to his office and reactivate PAL 18, Boots' old toy robot which he had upgraded and modified to help him with his detective work. He does so, and notes that PAL is behaving a little strangely, but the notion is soon shrugged off and the now 3-member party departs for Sunder Station, whence they'll travel to Sunder. After jumping through some hoops to get on board the Sunder transport, including disguising themselves as scientists, yeah, I'm sorry Boots, that mustache just ain't you, the trio arrive on Sunder, where their first priority is to find... Fatima's info says the scientist they're here to find, a Dr. Ro Bowman, is at a place called the Rainbow Sanctuary, where they eventually learn she was sent there after being labeled a heretic because her theories conflicted with those of the planet's scientific bigwigs. They find Ro experimenting on a piece of Mystech.
Would mean...
Stand by.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'd call that an unqualified success. Ro and Grumpos compare theories and conclude that Mystech responds to spatial anomalies. The bigger the anomaly, the greater the response. As it happens, one such anomaly appears over Sunder, which causes Ro's Mystech to put on a light show. Unfortunately, it also spells certain doom for the planet, and Rose says they have about 8 minutes to get to her private shuttle and skedaddle before Sunder is, well, rent asunder. Boots, Grumpos, and Pal commence the skedaddling, while Ro initially stays behind to take readings because, sure, that's the intelligent thing to do in this situation. The trio get to Ro's shuttle, and Ro herself arrives just as a large, shadowy blade, for lack of a better term, materializes and literally clefts the planet in twain. The shuttle manages to jump out of the system before it's enveloped by the resulting shockwave, but it also knocks out the shuttle's engines and navigations, and Ro estimates that they have about 2 weeks before the food runs out and certain death sets in. Which I think they take rather well.
Look, you left a sock over there. Over there. Is it so hard to pick up after yourself?
What? I was gonna pick it up tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Tomorrow? You son of a...
Should've stopped that man.
Let them kill each other.
Eat it! Eat it! Eat it! Eat it!
Thankfully, the shuttle drifts towards a planet called Democritus, and is tractored into one of its artificial outer rings. The quartet are attacked by maintenance bots, but Rose surprises everyone by taking one out with a fireball, which she explains is possible thanks to the now active Mistech. They then try to ask Democritus's High Council for help in repairing and refueling Rose's shuttle. They listen in on an emergency session, where they learn that the planet is about to be destroyed by a missile attack from the virulent Hive in 2 hours. Faced with their planet's imminent destruction, the Council respond like any good politicians would. They stand around and argue about it. Ro volunteers the group's help, and the Council says they'll need to pilot a state-of-the-art fighter into the Hive. To do so, they'll need to fight more robots, something which Pal categorically refuses to do. After Pal tells her he's feeling pretty pissed, Rose says that Pal has somehow become self-aware, which explains his strange behavior since his reactivation, although how exactly this happened is never clarified. The other three soon take the fighter and jet towards the virulent Hive, inexplicably bypassing all the missiles. Why not shoot some or all of them down? I mean, sure, the Hive would probably launch more, but you'd think at least getting rid of the initial wave would buy Democritus some more time. Anyway, the group eventually lands in the Hive, and after fighting a crapload of giant bugs, finds and kills the Hive Queen. They return to Democritus, and although the missiles are still heading for the planet, somehow defeating the Queen has made them harmless, and so they simply fall into the atmosphere. With the day saved, the Council thank our heroes like any good politicians would. They stand around and argue about it. Boots and company return to Center Station, where Boots is again considering leaving. Ro and Grumpus each try to get him to change his mind, though each for their own reason, when suddenly Democritus, after having lost quite a bit of weight, shows up and joins the party. That's right, you don't just get an inhabitant from the planet, or a few, or even the entire High Council. No, this game gives you a party member in the form of a whole freaking planet. 10 out of 10, game of the year, best game ever. Now, it's at this point that the story kind of splits. Ro and Grumpus each have their own objective they need Boots' help with, and I'm fairly sure you can do them in either order, but for my playthrough I went with Grumpus first, taking the newbie planet with me. Grumpus, whose eyes are apparently still made of dollar signs at this point despite all that's happened, wants to go to the planet Hephaestus, where a Mistech is cultivated, to learn how to unlock the ability to use a special modular Mistech known as Elementor. Upon arriving on the planet, Grumpus suggests the trio split up to find a way into the Mistech library. Boots manages to do so and is immediately arrested for trespassing, but manages to smooth talk his way out of a death sentence. The abbot of the library says that if Boots will track down the location of some stolen holy relics, the charges will be dropped, but he still wouldn't be granted access to the library. For that, the abbot asks Boots to repair a piece of equipment key in the production of Mistech. With all this done, Grumpus can finally use the library, and unlocks the secret to Elementor Mistechs. I'd explain it more, but I still don't fully understand it myself. I just know it involves the use of these bugs you can find in mounds like this throughout the game. With Grumpus' task completed, we return to Center Station, where the old geezer informs us he'll no longer be available as a party member, at least not for a good chunk of the rest of the game. I'm sorry, what? He's just dropping out? Not at all! At what point in my playthrough I got Grumpus to learn a mass heal ability, and now I'm basically losing that? Why? When questioning him about it, he says we don't need him now that we have Elementor, which is bullshit! I mean, there are no Mistechs that heal you, and while there are healing items, none of them are mass heals. Why give me access to such a useful ability as a mass heal when you're just going to deny me access to it throughout most of the game? That's stupid! Getting back to the story, Ro needs 2 pieces of equipment, a tachyon decay detector and a field transduction module to help her analyze the readings she took before Sunder was destroyed. She suggests they might be able to obtain a field transduction module from the black market, so they go to the Red Light District to talk to one of Boots' old contacts. While there, they stop in one of the strip clubs and catch a show featuring one of the star dancers named Stiletto, who Boots recognizes as Sarah, a former protege of his from back in the heyday of his detective agency. Stiletto ends her show with quite the finish, by flipping off the stage and knifing 3 goons at once. Holy shit! Please tell me she's gonna be in my party. Yeah? She's gonna be in your party. Awesome. Thanks. No problem. Now keep it down, would you? I'm trying to play board games. Sorry. Anyway. The group now has the FTM, but despite the fact that not only is the tachyon decay detector on display at the Science Museum, but it's a prototype built by Ro herself, the group can't get to it. So they return to their base in the Lounge of Commerce. While they make plans for obtaining the TDD, Pal, in an attempt to make amends for standing up to Boots earlier, sneaks off on his own to get the TDD. He manages to infiltrate the Science Museum, but finds the device gone, stolen just seconds earlier by, as it happens, Stiletto, who followed Pal in case he needed help and hands the device over to him. With both devices in their possession, Ro explains the situation in greater detail. Our universe was created by the Big Bang and will eventually collapse on itself due to gravity. This collapse will create another Big Bang, spawning a new galaxy, and so on ad infinitum. If more mass were to be added to a universe, it would collapse quicker, and Ro determines that someone from the universe before our own is removing matter from their universe and putting it into ours, with the intent to remove enough mass from their universe to stop its collapse and prevent the creation of any future universes. Grumples thinks there's a connection between this calamity and the activation of Mystech, and suggests that Boots go back to Hephaestus to speak to a figure known as the Grand Mysterium. Oh sure, he'll tell me where to go, but he won't come with me and heal me, the selfish old bastard. Boots speaks with the Mysterium, who tells him that a great battle between the forces of order and chaos has spilled into our universe, and that during this battle, order sent chaos into our universe. Since then, chaos has been trying to escape into the previous universe and prevent its collapse, thus wiping out any future universes, including our own, and that in which order resides. The Mysterium explains that the only way to access the previous universe is through a hidden cosmic gate, which requires a key, and that said key must be destroyed to prevent chaos's escape. He then says that if Boots and company truly wish to aid the forces of order, they should travel to the planet Limbus. Boots travels there along with Ro and Democritus, the latter of which insists on tagging along, but en route to the planet, the shuttle is captured by a ship belonging to Rictus, a comic book supervillain. No, you did not mishear me. The group makes their way through the ship, fighting various types of henchmen along the way, eventually taking on Rictus himself, and although they defeat him, he revives and throws our heroes into a cell with other superheroes. Which basically means I went through a very difficult boss fight for nothing, and I freaking hate that! Anyway, among the heroes in the cell is Paco el Puño Estrella, a childhood hero of Boots. Boots, Ro, and Democritus get into his cell and try to convince him to help them escape, when suddenly the airlock in the prison is open, blowing everyone in the outer prison into space. Faced once again with the rapidly approaching destruction of their planet, the Democritus High Council respond like any good politicians would. They stand around and, oh, no, they actually made a snap decision. Well done. Good job. I'm proud of you guys. Yep, before they're blown out into space with the rest of the heroes, the High Council react quickly, for once, and return the planet to its normal size, saving Boots, Ro, and Paco, but scattering them to different locations on the planet in the process. Boots winds up in a snowy village called Whittenden, or Whitenden, not really sure which, where his investigation into the disappearance of several villagers leads him to a fight in an ice cave with a creature called a Wimpa, and initially the name is very appropriate, until he takes a couple of hits, at which point...
Make my monster!
Also, what the hell is Boots' head doing in one of the snow piles? We take control of Paco in a camp called Comedion. The local army here was forced out of their base when all of the security measures inside went haywire and turned on them. Paco also learns there's a young girl trapped in the base, and so he takes it upon himself to infiltrate the base and rescue her. Meanwhile, Ro finds herself in Tensil, an alien settlement in the forest. The chieftainess there says there's a nearby human village that Ro can go to, but before she'll disclose the location, Ro must gain her trust. Weird. You'd think if this chieftainess didn't trust someone, she'd do anything she could to get them out of their village rather than keeping them around longer. The chieftainess instructs Ro to bring her 4 golden leaves, after which she'll tell Ro both her fortune and the location of the human village.
Liar!
Yeah, I played back this text box here 2 or 3 times after recording the game to make sure I didn't misread it. The chieftainess definitely tells Ro, get me the golden leaves and I'll tell you your fortune and how to get to the human village. Well, she comes through on the fortune part, but then says that she needs an ancient relic to help reunify her people, and that said relic is in a temple filled with traps that no one knows how to get past anymore, and would Ro mind terribly going to get it for her. Ro obliges, for whatever reason, and after all 3 heroes have finished their respective tasks, they reunite on Democritus' outer ring, thanks to Ro, who somehow got her shuttle back off screen, and they rest at an inn before resuming the journey to Limbus. Upon nearing the planet, they see a glowing orb emerge from behind it, which opens to form a vortex through which 3 metallic objects come out and make planetfall. After landing on the planet themselves, Boots and company make their way to the main village, having to fight and kill these creatures to gain entry, only to be captured for their efforts. They are brought before the village elder, where Boots name drops the Grand Mysterium to avoid a death sentence. So the Elder reveals that the objects that fell as our heroes arrived were probes from a group called the Dark Servants, as indicated by the crest, and that the probes herald an impending attack. Feeling responsible for killing their guardians and thus weakening the village's defenses, Boots' team splits up and helps guard the village on 3 fronts, and while these fights are relatively easy, I do have to stop a minute and just point out the utter uselessness of your allies in these battles. You can't heal them, neither can they heal you, or themselves for that matter, and the damage they deal is as near enough to nothing as makes no odds. It's a wonder they don't go down as soon as they're hit, so what exactly is their point? With the attack repelled and the village saved, Boots is made part of a secret society called the Vigil, and is handsomely rewarded with yet more backstory. 60 years ago, the Eye of Suffering, that glowy orb vortex thingy our heroes saw as they arrived on the planet, first appeared, and the Dark Servants made their first attack, wiping out 1/3 of the people of Limbus in one afternoon. It was later learned that the particular brand of darkness served by the Dark Servants is a race known as the Shatagra, beings who are pretty much the embodiment of chaos. The Shatagra have been in a centuries-long war with the Vyre, a race dedicated to order, and the Vyre have been losing badly. In a last-ditch effort for victory, the Vyre kicked the Shatagra back through time into our universe. Realizing this would effectively give the current inhabitants of our universe a bad day, they also sent back Mystech for the people to defend themselves with. But to prevent it from being misused, the Mystech would only activate if the fabric of the universe were tampered with, such as with the destruction of the planet Sunder. Now the Dark Servants have somehow infiltrated into the previous universe. How exactly they managed that without the key the Grand Mysterium seemed to think was necessary is never explained, and they are in the process of shifting matter from that universe into our own. Having brought Boots up to speed, the village elder mentions a strange, shifting world, that world being Anachronox, and Boots must return there and seek out a secret member of the Vigil, who has been undercover as a bar owner, and help him find the Echo Gate, which is the gateway into the past universe. Boots, and let's face it, the audience, knows exactly who this man is, and after fighting off an ambush on the way back to the shuttle, Boots confronts Rowdy, who promptly rips his face off and reveals his real name to be... that. Rowdy says that he has since found the Echo Gate, but he still doesn't have the key, also hinting that this was the key he wanted Boots to find in the beginning of the game. He does, however, know where it is, the Mystech tunnels. Boots tells him he and Grumpos were already down there and didn't find anything. Except they kinda did. Yep, that worthless cube they found was actually the key to the Echo Gate, and now, thanks to Boots, it's in the hands of Detta the mob boss. So Boots and company head to Detta's fortress in an area known as One Gate, and split up to sneak in the fortress 3 different ways. Along the way, they note that Detta is apparently cloning an army for himself, so once the heroes regroup, Boots suggests that he and Stiletto take on Detta, basically because they both have a score to settle with him, while everyone else shuts down the cloning facility. Why couldn't they better their chances by all of them ganging up on Detta, then handling the cloning facility later? Who the hell knows? But Boots and Stiletto soon defeat Detta, despite him using a wannabe Metal Gear along with 2 mechanics and later on some Mystech, and Stiletto gives Detta the same finish she gave the goons in a strip club. With the Echo Gate key in hand, the group returns to Rowdy, who brings them to the gate and says that the key must be thrown into the gate to destroy it and keep the gate closed. After a little goading, Grumpos is elected to do the deed, but at the last second he's revealed to be a Dark Servant and instead opens the gate, releasing the Shatagra along with this guy, whose name was never revealed, or at least I never caught it. This guy creates a platform and rides the gate into a vortex it created, which presumably leads to the previous universe. You'll know why it's unclear in a bit. Initially, the heroes can only stand back and watch helplessly, but then they hear the game's theme song playing and think, oh yeah, we should probably do something at this point. And they all jump onto the platform with, this guy, and fight him. Now, even though I was able to get to the final boss, I wasn't able to get past him. So a big thanks to YouTube user Blaze Rhodon for helping me out here with video of the ending. I've got a link to his channel in the video description. Upon defeating, this guy, the platform is destroyed and slowly descends back to Anachronox. But the vortex is still open and the Shatagra are still running around. Boots, apparently having found his true calling, closes his office and vows to Rowdy that he will make everything right. And he and the rest of the heroes set off in Rose's shuttle into the vortex, and the game ends on a sort of pseudo cliffhanger. To be honest, I don't really mind the way this game ended so much. All it really does is leave the game open to expansion rather than just outright ending it unresolved. The final boss fight and the final shot of the shuttle going through the vortex give it at least some closure. Now, if the game had ended just after the reveal of this guy, it would bother me far more. Why? Because despite the ending of this game practically screaming sequel bait, there hasn't been a sequel made in the 15 years since this game's release, and there doesn't appear to be one in the works anytime soon either. Anachronox was originally meant to comprise only one title, but at one point during its development in 1999, the dev team felt that the story as it was too large for one game and would cause massive delays, or at least more than there already had been. By this point, the main game had already been delayed by 2 years. So plans and assets were made for a sequel with a planned release date of around 2000, early 2000. But further delays meant that Anachronox was eventually released in June of 2001, and Ion Storm closed down a month later, effectively ending any further work on the project, though not for lack of trying. Lead developer Tom Hall tried buying the rights to Anachronox, though without success, and in 2010 said that if no sequel were made by 2020, he'd simply put the rest of the story on his website and move on. Meanwhile, in 2015, Square Enix posted a statement on their website essentially inviting indie developers to pitch new ideas for some of their IPs, including Anachronox, though as of this review, nothing appears to have surfaced.
The story itself is well written for the most part, with the perfect mix of humor and dark moments, and there were only 1 or 2 points I took real issue or question with. For instance, Pal 18. Now, Pal is easily my favorite character, if not one of my favorites, and in fact, I feel some of the best lines in the game come from him.
They're running through my batteries.
But the notion of him being self-aware was mishandled, for lack of a better term. I don't want to say it came out of nowhere when it was revealed, because it didn't. That much was obvious as soon as he was reactivated. Roe, however, made it sound like it was a sudden or recent development, but there were a couple of flashbacks to Boots' earlier days as a PI where Pal is not only active, but seems to show the same spunk and attitude he does in the main story. According to Pal, he was inactive for a year when Boots and Gropos come to get him, so these flashbacks take place at least that long ago. In addition, both times the notion of Pal's self-awareness is brought up, it's dropped almost instantly, so if it was supposed to be some big character-developing revelation, I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing it. Second, when discussing the then unnamed Chitagra's plans to escape into the previous universe to transfer matter from theirs to our own, the Grand Mysterium explicitly states that to do so, he would need to pass through the Echo Gate, and to do that, he would need a key. We later learn through Boots' flashback at Rowdy's that the key was the piece of Mystech he and Grumpos stumbled upon in the Mystech tunnels, which means throughout the entire game, the key was either in the tunnels or in the hands of Detta, a mob boss with no discernible connection to the Dark Servants and thus no method nor reason to give the key to them. So unless I've missed something, there should be no way for the Dark Servants to get to the previous universe. Yet that's what the village elder on Limbus seems to think they've done. So if that's the case, why don't the Chitagra just enter the previous universe the same way the Dark Servants did? I mean, if your servants can, surely you can too.
Points like that are why cliffhanger endings, even though they don't bother me too much if handled properly like Anachronox, still bother me a little bit. Because if these issues were supposed to be resolved in a sequel, the way things are looking now, we'll probably never know.
I came into Anachronox having already played Daikatana, and although I probably shouldn't have, I did find myself allowing the latter to set the benchmark for the former, and wondering just how much better or worse this game would be. In terms of graphics, one of my chief complaints was how Daikatana was just an eyesore in all aspects. And despite having similar environments, however, Anachronox is by far the superior game in the looks department. Save for 1 or 2 spots on the titular planet itself, no area was too dark when it didn't need to be. The character models look a damn sight better here. Well, for the most part, 1 or 2 of them are still a little on the blocky side, and don't even get me started on Paco. Those polygonal pecs of his make him look like Lara Croft, and not in a good way. Still, at least their mouths move this time, and the lip syncing ain't half bad. Plus, I love the design of some of the aliens, not to mention some of the smaller details, like how the look of the text box you get when you talk with an NPC changes from planet to planet. The developers also made sure not to break the immersion when it comes to how you interact with the game. Fatima's life cursor floats around the screen serving as your in-game cursor, both when exploring and when in battles. Even in the menu, your quests are described to you by Fatima herself. The music is well composed and varies nicely as you travel to different planets, from being suitably cyberpunky in some areas, to driving and dramatic in the boss fights, to just
downright beautiful and calming in places like Cinder Station. Though in some parts, again mainly on Anachronox itself, it teeters on being a little repetitive.
You like that?
I got nothing to say here. I just wanted to sit here and listen to this.
Can't prove it yet.
The voice acting is great. Not perfect, though. There have been one or two times where I felt an actor didn't deliver the proper emotion for a line that needed it, or just flat out sounded like they were reading a line rather than saying it. For the most part, however, it's very well done, which makes me wish it wasn't just restricted to cutscenes. When simply talking with an NPC, all you get is a text box, and while the lines are no less humorous, I think some of the impact is lost with no voices to accompany them. For the majority of your time playing Anachronox, you'll be doing one of two things: exploring the world around you and talking to various NPCs, or battling. When you're roaming through the world, you can move your character with WASD and just click to interact with anyone or anything that's interactive, indicated by Fatima's life cursor spinning. You can use Tab to switch between characters once you have more than one, and that's important because each character has a different world skill they can use on certain objects or people by holding Control and left-clicking, and it's only usable if you have that character set as the lead for your party. For example, Boots is able to pick the locks of certain doors and chests, Pal can interface with certain computers, and if you need someone to do your bidding, instead of hypnotizing them, just have Grumpos perform Yammer and talk non-stop to them until they'll do just about anything to have him shut up. When using a world skill, it's not as simple as pointing and clicking, however. First, you have to complete a timed minigame, which varies depending on the skill. Most of these minigames control adequately, with a couple of exceptions. In Pal's minigame, you have to complete a line from the bottom of a power grid to a flashing section on top. You only have 3 types of line you can work with, and it's not as simple as going directly from the bottom to the top, as some of the squares in the grid are damaged and will break if you try to place a line on them, costing you time. The problem is these damaged squares are barely discernible from the regular squares, and even with the gamma turned up I had to squint to see which was which. Plus the game is mouse driven and the control feels imprecise. In Paco's minigame, you have to use your mouse to keep this fist icon within a larger picture of Paco's chest, with the icon progressively shaking more and more as the timer winds down, eventually to the point where it's just ridiculous and I feel like I'd do better just letting go of the mouse and hoping for the best. I think it would have been better if, say, the picture of Paco were the same size as the fist icon, and moved at certain intervals, with those intervals getting faster closer to the end of the minigame. There's a third character whose minigame I found a little confusing, but if you skip the story section, I don't want to spoil who it is, so I'll say no more here. When it comes to saving your game, Anachronox borrows a page from Daikatana's book in the form of these time minders, in that, like the save gems, by default you can only save if you find and pet a time minder. However, as adorable as these little guys are, they also share the save gem's utter pointlessness, as you can easily go into the options at any point during the game, no matter the difficulty, and toggle the ability to save any old wares. As mentioned earlier, Fatima serves as your guide, and she'll keep track of any and all of your main quest goals. Note the use of the word main. Anachronox does have side quests, but these are not tracked by Fatima, so if you happen to stumble onto someone who offers one, you'll need to have a notebook at the ready. Something else you may need a notebook for is to make your own map, speaking of things the game doesn't do or have. While some areas weren't too terrible, to say others were maze-like would have been an understatement. Looking at you, Miss Tech Tunnels. At least you don't have to worry about falling to your death, as even though there are more than a few walkways which suggest that one false step equals death, invisible walls aplenty ensure that never happens, making your runs through every area nice and safe. And if you happen to have cleared out all the enemies in an area, long and boring. And with no sort of fast travel system, trust me, you'll be doing a lot of running back and forth, doing anything from completing quests to changing party members. Hell, for the latter, you may even have to go all the way back to your shuttle and travel to Cinder Station, because you can only have 2 party members, not including Boots, and the inactive members don't travel from planet to planet with you, and there's no way to do a quick select as in a game like Knights of the Old Republic. All told, my total playtime for this game was around 22 hours, and I wouldn't be surprised if half of that was running around backtracking. Then there's the battle system. Now, I won't say this is where the game totally falls apart. The mechanics are more or less sound in theory, but with the way it's implemented, it is by far the weakest part of the game. So first, a quick tutorial on the mechanics. A character can perform one of a few actions. Beat is a character's main attack, performed with either a melee or ranged weapon depending on the character. Move allows a character to move to a different node in the arena if there are any available. Good for getting your melee fighters up close and personal. Item is, well, self-explanatory. Then there's the battle skill, which lets your character perform a special move. When Ro is added to your party, you have the ability to use Mistech. Each Mistech can cause damage and inflict a different status effect on an enemy, but can also be used on an ally to cure them of that status effect. For instance, a fire-based Mistech can cause periodic burning damage to an enemy, but can also remove a burn effect from an ally. You also have the ability in certain areas to use an object in the environment to affect the battle, but this only popped up in a few boss battles, and even then I rarely understood what I was supposed to be doing with them. Each character has what is called a battle plaque on the bottom of the screen. There are 3 bars on the plaque, representing health, NRG, which is used for performing Mistech attacks, and the Bouge? This meter. This affects what special moves that character can make. Each character also has a recovery meter.
Ah, boy, here we go.
Which is indicated by a red circle around your character's portrait, with the circle turning green when the character can perform an action. Now, I talked in detail about my problems with action meters in my Septerra Core video, so needless to say I was not happy to see not only does it return in Anachronox, it's actually worse. In Septerra Core, a character only needed a third of their action meter filled before they could do anything. Here, you have to wait for the whole damn thing to fill up. Now for those that haven't seen the other episode, a quick note of my gripes. Anytime one of your characters is performing an action or being attacked, the progress of all 3 characters' meters is halted, not just the character being affected, which would make far more sense. To me, freezing all 3 bars anytime one person is doing something, even something as simple as using an item, does nothing but make a battle drag out for longer than necessary. I would say the good news is your failed escape attempts don't reset the bars in this game, but that brings up the bad news. There are no failed escape attempts, because there's no option to escape at all. So if you're just trying to get back to town or somewhere you've already been to get an item with a different party member, and you want to bypass a battle, tough luck. Unfortunately, the problems with the battle system don't stop there. Battles are completely icon-based. Anytime you want to attack an enemy, rather than clicking directly on the enemy you want to attack, you instead click on the icon representing that enemy above your character's battle plaque. However, rather annoyingly, despite both the icons and enemies being situated from left to right, an icon won't necessarily correspond to the enemy you think it will. In other words, the leftmost icon might represent the second enemy from the right. You can see which icon represents which enemy by hovering over an icon and seeing which enemy lights up, but that's only when the camera isn't moving, which leads to my next complaint, and that is the camera is rarely not moving, and I mean moving. Character attacking an enemy? Sweeping camera movements. Enemy attacking a character? Sweeping camera movements. Character using an item? Sweeping camera movements. Did your character fart? Well, they can't in this game, but I'm sure if they did, the camera would be all over it. With the camera's constant motion for every little thing that happens, it's difficult at times to see which enemy you're trying to target, and on top of that, it just makes the battle hard to keep looking at. No exaggeration, with the long, drawn-out battles and the continuous camera motion throughout, my eyes started hurting, and I felt like I was getting dizzy.
Sa, yokoso mina to the newly renamed Wall of Worthiness. I personally think it suits it better than Worthiness or Meter. So anyway, where does that go on it? When I learned of the game's connection to Daikatana, naturally, I was a little worried. But after a few minutes of playing, it immediately became clear Anachronox wasn't going to be anywhere near as bad as that. Now, sure, the graphics show their age a little bit, but it still looks and sounds fantastic. The story is top-notch, the characters are all likable and well-developed. Anachronox is not a bad game by any means, not by a long shot, especially for the price. But to me, there are just too many little things wrong with it here and there that stop it from being an exceptional game. So I think I'm going to put it there. Well, that'll do it for another episode of Low Budget Gaming. You know, I had a lot of ups and downs when I was trying to get this episode made. I mean, my desktop died at one point and I had to try and get it back up and running. But, you know, I had a lot more fun than I was expecting to playing this game. And I think, looking forward, for my next project, I want to try and do something... Shit! Oh, no, Fatima!